Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis and this is Literally Graphic. And today we are going to be talking about my lesbian experience with loneliness, a pretty brutal nonfiction manga that should have basically all your standard body image, depression, anxiety, self-harm, trigger warnings, binge eating, and general anxiety stuff, kind of trigger warnings, and perfectly fine if you are not in the place to read stuff that deals with that kind of shit right now. This book will be waiting for you if you ever come to a place where that's okay. It's, as I said, a very, very brutally honest manga that actually originated as a webcomic and kind of definitely breaks with your kind of traditional manga, not even nonfiction manga kind of mold in a lot of ways. And actually, I was just wondering, I'm not sure if I've read any other, I said biography, I guess I should have said autobiographical manga, because I have read a biographical manga before about the Dalai Lama. But yeah, if anyone knows any other non-fiction tell-all memoir style manga, always exciting, always exciting. There's a sequel to this that I'm excited to get my hands on in the near future. That's one good thing about being late to the hype game. Anyway, that aside, to kind of dig more into my reactions and thoughts on my lesbian experience with loneliness by Nagata Kabi. It was definitely darker than I expected, and that seemed to be a lot of people's general consensus. The packaging for this book appears to be obviously a little anxious, but more on the goofy, almost cute side maybe, but it definitely went there with kind of the honesty, brutal honesty and darkness of being a depressed, anxious woman in Japan who doesn't really seem to know that much about lesbianism and definitely suffers as a result. While there is some sex in the book, and sexuality is definitely a central theme, coming out played less of a role than necessarily I was expecting, and there was definitely no really sexy parts. There is a fairly positive portrayal of female, even lesbian sex work, which is pretty exciting though. I do have a sex work comic that is another one that I'm supposed to read for the Get Graphic Readathon, which I'm in the midst of as I film this, so hopefully I'll have even more really interesting sex work comics to talk about in the near future, but that's still not a very common thing for me to come across as someone who is a pretty pro sex work and definitely not a sex worker exclusionary feminist by any means. Well, obviously, as an autobiographical comic, we're kind of following Kabi as they go through this journey towards more recognizing and kind of starting to live into her lesbian sexuality as a pansexual woman who was raised in a fairly anti-LGBTQ sex-negative environment. I actually jived a lot with the general pathology. I slightly misusing that word, but it seems like the closest thing I could think of that she kind of develops around her sexuality. There's a way in which, even though she's not necessarily apparently raised in an anti-LGBTQ environment because she doesn't know anything about it, there's a way in which you're like doing things that you don't realize boil down to the fact that you are actually, say, attracted to women. And this is seems to be a big part of why Kabi is becomes so anxious and so depressed and stuff. I mean, it also has to do with people pleasing, which I, again, can definitely relate to a lot, but as she kind of unpacks her lesbian sexuality, there's a lot of underlying things that she had thought made her weird or, you know, taboo, especially around a feeling she had for her mother, which obviously could really mess with a person's head if they didn't quite realize why exactly they were having these feelings. Yeah, I definitely could jive with that, and it definitely inspired a lot of thinking in me as someone who obviously finds people of like all gender presentations have the potential of finding them attractive. It's just interesting how much more obsessed with it I was when I just saw it as a problem. I didn't quite recognize what it was because I was very self-conscious about being perceived as a lesbian. It did strike me as somewhat interesting that this came out so closely to the translated work of my brother's husband. It does seem like perhaps we're getting more translated work in this kind of area, and that's definitely something to be more excited about, because LGBTQ representation that's been coming over from Japan for quite some time now has, as with the Western stuff, been, you know, kind of problematic and definitely not own voice. So it is an exciting development to see more of that at least coming over, if not also just being produced in general. And I definitely think that while this review has been kind of like highly personal, obviously this book has been widely accepted and hyped and connected with a lot of people. So I just wanted to give my personal perspective, but I think objectively speaking, it's probably a pretty good work too. The art in this volume is loose and leaning towards the cute side. I definitely don't want to scare anyone off who hasn't seen this and thinks, oh, maybe it's like super kawaii or something. No, that is not the case. But it does remind me of some other josei manga that I have already read. For example, in Clothes Called Fat, they kind of had a similar style. I feel like it's something that people use to create appealing artwork that doesn't necessarily sexualize the characters in the same way that some other sort of styles of manga art do. I know some of the romance manga that is currently propping up my coffee table because it's missing a foot is definitely a similar style, if even looser than that. I didn't like that romance. It was okay, but it wasn't that great, which is why it's now propping up my coffee table. But if you like this book, I would definitely recommend In Clothes Called Fat, if you haven't already read it. And the use of pink as kind of a complementary color, it was very nice. I'm not usually a huge pink fan, but this was not a like obnoxious kind of pink. It was just kind of light there. I barely noticed it sometimes, but you know, it's nice to have some color every once in a while. Though, yeah, black and white all the way. That is that, and I will see you all next time. Bye! And as always, Literally Graphic is recorded on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation. I live here because of British colonization, Indigenous genocide, and more geographically specific, Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase, which was finalized in 1805 between representatives of the Crown and certain Mississauga peoples. This treaty was a lie and has since been broken many times over. Saying so reflects only my own small steps towards knowing the truth and does nothing for reconciliation.